What's up, everyone? So I want to talk about Roger Goodell today. He's obviously one of the most controversial figures in sports. Many people don't like him, but he does not care. As the commissioner of the NFL, he has made hundreds of millions of dollars, and he's made the owners billions of dollars. So the best place to start is the NFL's annual league meeting. This past week was the meeting this year. It took place at the Biltmore Hotel in Phoenix, Arizona. All 32 GMs, head coaches, and owners were there. And they're joined by a bunch of media members, reporters, insiders, and other people like that. So these meetings are done on an annual basis, and they talk about a bunch of stuff. They talked about this year flexing Thursday night football games, so moving Sunday games to Thursday. They voted on 10 plus different rule changes, and a bunch of the owners probably talked about the upcoming Washington Commanders sale. But I think the most important thing that was probably discussed at this year's meeting, not probably, it was discussed, is Roger Goodell's upcoming contract extension. So Roger Goodell has been working at the NFL since 1982. He was an intern there for 3 months, later got a job, has been at the NFL since. He became commissioner in 2006 and has made $500 million, over $500 million as commissioner of the NFL since 2006. Obviously, super impressive. His tenure hasn't come without problems. There's been lawsuits. There's been players that are angry at his punishments. There have been fans that claim that owners are greedy, ticket prices are getting too expensive, and so forth. But undoubtedly, he has done an amazing job for the owners, who he ultimately reports to. So I think the first thing to understand is how he got this job. I want to run through just a little bit of the timeline that led to him becoming commissioner, because I think it's super interesting. So for those that don't know, Roger Goodell was born and raised in Westchester County, which is right outside of New York City. It's to the north of New York City. He comes from a wealthy family. His dad was actually a lawyer in Washington, D.C., and ultimately became a U.S. senator. So he attended Bronxville High School, very good public high school in Westchester County. He played football, basketball, baseball, was super into sports, wasn't good enough to go to college to play sports, though. He ended up going to Washington and Jefferson College in Pennsylvania. He graduated in 1981 with a degree in economics and was an honor student. Now, this is where it kind of gets interesting, because all of his classmates that graduated with business degrees or economics degrees or things like that, they moved to New York City, they took consulting jobs, they took investment banking jobs. But Roger Goodell didn't, and he had a very clear plan, which I think is fascinating. If you go on the Washington and Jefferson College website, they have a quote from a letter that he wrote his father. When he graduated, he wrote his dad a letter essentially saying, "Thank you for putting me through college. Thank you for paying my education, taking care of me. I want to make you proud." And the last note of this letter said, and I quote, "The only thing I want to do in life, other than to be commissioner of the NFL, is to make you proud." I mean, that's like something out of a movie. I literally couldn't believe it when I read it, but apparently that's what he wrote his dad. So Goodell then went to work. He wrote a letter to all 28 NFL teams and Commissioner Pete Rozell's office. And I have a copy of the letter here because it's sort of become famous now, and I'll read it to you. He said, "Mr. Rozell, dear Mr. Rozell, I am writing to you in reference to any job openings you may have in your offices. Having just finished my undergraduate education at Washington and Jefferson College this past May, I am presently looking for a position in the management of professional sports. Being an avid football fan, I have always desired a career in the NFL. Consequently, as a great admirer of you, it would be both an honor and a pleasure to work for you in any position that may be available. Thank you for your consideration. I look forward to hearing from you. Respectfully, Roger S. Goodell." Now, the interesting part of this is that all of the teams said no. A couple of them actually responded saying no, and most of them just didn't respond at all. But then he got a letter from Pete Rozell himself, and he said, "Mr. Goodell, I would love to have you do an internship here at the NFL offices for 3 months. Basically a summer internship, what you would think out of college." Now, it's not exactly clear how this happened. Maybe some of it had to do with his dad. I'm not really sure. But the bottom line is he got an internship. He worked on the PR team, cutting clips and copying news articles, he says, for the PR team for 3 months during the summer. That led him to an internship with the New York Jets the following year. He went to the New York Jets for 1 year. He did an internship with them. Then he returned to the NFL on the PR team in 1984, and he has never left. 1984 to 2023. That's over 40 years this guy has worked for the NFL. So when he returned to the NFL in 1984, he spent 3 more years on the PR team. Then he eventually became the assistant to Lamar Hunt, who was the president of the American Football Conference, the AFC. And then Paul Tagliabue was named commissioner. And this is where it gets interesting, because Paul Tagliabue essentially made Roger Goodell his right-hand man. From 1990 to 2001, he held 6 different positions, everything from director of international development to vice president of business development to executive vice president of business and football development to running properties and club services. You get the point. He held a bunch of positions over 11 years, kept getting promoted and promoted and promoted. In 2001, he had been with the NFL for 17 years, and Paul Tagliabue named him the COO of the NFL, Chief Operating Officer. It was a big bump in responsibilities for him. And I want to give you a little bit of an idea of what he was actually doing at this time. Goodell was mainly responsible for something called NFL Ventures. And while that sounds, maybe that's their venture capital arm, maybe that's their media arm, this is what it is. NFL Ventures runs NFL's media properties, marketing, sales, consumer products, international business, stadium development, special events, strategic planning. That's like everything. I mean, I literally can't imagine anything else because he also led expansion efforts, realignment, stadium development. He was a key player in the launch of the NFL Network, and he managed negotiations for media deals and the CBA with the NFLPA. So if you think about the most important things that go on in the NFL league office, it's a CBA with the NFLPA, it's media rights negotiations, it's conference realignment, it's stadium development, it's international expansion. Roger Goodell had his hands in all of that as the COO of the business. So in 2006, when Paul Tagliabue stepped down and resigned as the commissioner and retired, Goodell was the clear choice. The owners unanimously approved him over 4 other candidates to become the 8th commissioner in NFL history. There's a famous quote from Robert Kraft, who is the owner of the New England Patriots. He said, "Roger got his MBA from Pete Rozelle and Paul Tagliabue. That's not a bad education." Those were obviously the 2 NFL commissioners before him that he worked under. The owners, essentially, what that means, were confident in his ability. They trusted him. They thought he could do a good job leading the organization. So this is interesting because Roger Goodell has now been the commissioner for 17 years. And I think, generally speaking, most NFL fans don't really like him. I think I would agree with that. You would probably agree with that. And Roger Goodell would probably even agree with that. He steps on stage for the NFL draft. He gets booed. He gets constant hate online. You look up his score of ratings. It's just not good. And the reason for this is quite simple. Right when he became commissioner, he implemented a new policy, a personal conduct policy, that essentially made him the judge, the jury, and the executioner for all punishments. He heard the players' cases, he even reviewed appeals, and he handed down punishments. And what this led to was just a bunch of inconsistency across things. They didn't have policies in place. They didn't have rules around what would get which punishment, etc. So he suspended Sean Payton an entire year for Bountygate, maybe deserved, maybe not, whatever, you can decide for yourself. But my point is that there were suspensions like Josh Gordon. Josh Gordon was suspended an entire year for failing a drug test for marijuana. Ray Rice, who assaulted his wife in an elevator on camera, was then suspended 2 games, right? And there was a bunch of public outcry. The video came out and they said, how could you suspend this guy for 2 games? This is a million times worse than Josh Gordon smoking weed and other players that were, maybe got a DUI or something like that. And people were right. The policies were then amended. Ray Rice was suspended the entire year. A judge ultimately overturned that and said that Roger Goodell shouldn't have the ability to be the judge, jury, and executioner. And some of those policies have changed. But the second part of this is that he has significantly altered the look and feel of the game. And what I mean by this is quite simple. Roger Goodell has put a paramount on player safety. But it's not necessarily player safety as in we want less Thursday night football games, because obviously now they're trying to move Sunday games to Thursday and potentially give teams 2 extra games. They already added a game to the calendar. There's now 17 games. So you look at that and you're like, how does he care about player safety? He cares about keeping the best players on the field. And the best players on the field and the most important players are the quarterbacks, right? So he has drastically altered the rules and told officials to look at quarterback play specifically, make sure none of them get hurt. So that has changed the league a lot. The physicality has obviously dropped a bunch. The aggressiveness has dropped a bunch. The Pro Bowl is now a joke. It's like a dodgeball competition. We used to have Sean Taylor literally running downhill and clocking punters. That has changed. Roger Goodell has been a big part of that. And this one quote I think is very, very, very telling. It's from a Bleacher Report article in 2015. It says, according to Google Trends, the term "no fun league" didn't register on Google until the year Goodell took over for Tagliabue. Nowadays, it's a popular phrase, one synonymous with Goodell's reign. Literally, the term "no fun league," the acronym for the NFL that people joke about sometimes, wasn't even a trend, wasn't even a search on Google until Roger Goodell took over. In fact, Goodell is so hated by the fans that a 2015 poll by ESPN revealed that 61% of the fans thought he should step down or resign as commissioner, that he wasn't doing a good enough job. But like I said before, The fans aren't the ones that matter when it comes to Roger Goodell. It's the billionaire owners and what their opinion is of him. And objectively speaking, he has done an incredible job for them. He has made them billions and billions and billions of dollars. If you look at just what he's done from a revenue standpoint, in 2006, when Roger Goodell took over for Paul Tagliabue as commissioner, the NFL was doing about $6.5 billion in revenue. This year, they'll probably do about $20 billion in revenue, which is obviously drastically more in revenue. And more importantly, there has been labor peace under Roger Goodell's term. He has negotiated 2 new CBAs with the NFL Players Association in 2011 and 2020. The one in 2011 had a 5-month lockout, a 5-month work stoppage, but no games were missed over either of these. So there was no lockouts, no games missed. And this is important because not only did they add a 17th game last year, they gave up a little bit of revenue, 1 percentage point of revenue to the players for that. But ultimately, labor peace combined with more games, what does that give you? That gives you increasing media rights. So the NFL recently signed a 10-year deal with a bunch of different media properties worth $100 billion. It's about $110 billion over the next 10 years they'll make from people like Fox, ESPN, CBS, and NBC, their typical players. But then he also signed new deals with new players like Amazon for $1 billion a year for Thursday Night Football. And now YouTube TV for Sunday Ticket paying $2 billion a year. And the result has been tremendous. And this is so important because 60% of the NFL revenue comes from media rights. It's literally more than all the other categories combined. If you looked at concessions, if you looked at tickets, if you looked at licensing, if you looked at clubs and suites, if you looked at sponsorships, all of that is smaller than the piece of pie when it comes to media rights. So media rights are the most important. You need labor peace to be able to do that. You need high quality of play. Roger Goodell has been laser focused on this stuff throughout his tenure as commissioner. Now, don't get me wrong. He didn't do this for free. He has made a tremendous amount of money. Roger Goodell reportedly gets paid about $60 million a year in salary. The New York Times reported in 2020 and 2021, he earned $130 million per year. Per year. $130 million per year because of his ability to negotiate the new CBA, but also the new media deals. A lot of that came in bonuses. And when you add everything up from 2006 to 2023, 2024, Roger Goodell has made over $500 million as NFL commissioner. And this is important in context because that's drastically more than any NFL player in history. I have the list right here. Tom Brady made $332 million. He's the highest paid NFL player in history for career earnings. Aaron Rodgers at number 2, $305 million. Matthew Stafford, $300 million. Matt Ryan, $291 million. Drew Brees, $269 million. So Roger Goodell has made $170 million more than any NFL player in history, and he's never taken a hit. I mean, that is absolutely insane. It is incredible. But I want to give you a little bit more context. One, he's obviously made the owners a bunch of money. Revenue has increased, media deals have increased. But just look at franchise valuations. The Washington Commanders are about to sell for $6 to $7 billion. $6 to $7 billion. Their stadium is falling apart. They never make the playoffs. The team has been terrible. The owner is constantly getting sued. It's been a mess. It's been an absolute mess. They've rebranded, they've changed the name, and they're going to sell for $6 to $7 billion, even though they have to build a new stadium. Franchise valuations have gone insane. The Cowboys, I don't even want to imagine what they would sell for. So the owners are obviously very happy. They've made a bunch of money on paper, and the owners that have sold have done really well too. They're really, really, really happy about that. But then if you just think in percentage terms, his $60 million annual salary is about 0.3%, I think it is, of the total annual revenue of the NFL. 0.3%. That's a relatively small thing to pay. And when you look at it in that context, it's like, okay, I could see how that makes sense. And then when you look at other commissioners across sports, whether it's Adam Silver with the NBA, whether it's Rob Manfred with the MLB, Gary Bettman with the NHL, whatever it is, all of those commissioners reportedly make, again, it's like 20 to 30 to potentially a little bit more millions of dollars per year. So if one of them is making $30 million a year and the NFL is 2 times bigger, $60 million a year might make sense. If the if the owners make billions of dollars on top of that in franchise fees and their fees and their valuations are skyrocketing much higher than everyone else, it makes sense that he might get a $100 million bonus. I don't know, right? And if you just look at it in the context of what he's been able to accomplish to what he's been paid, I think it makes a lot of sense. He's obviously now going to be extended. Football is just a game. It's a sport, but it's also a massive business. So it is not surprising to me that he's being extended again. I think he'll essentially have this job till whenever he wants. We'll see who is the dark horse to replace him. Maybe it takes 3 years. Maybe it takes 4 years. Maybe it takes another 10 years. But Roger Goodell is not going anywhere in the meantime. NFL owners are more than happy to extend him. He is their shield. He takes all of the hate. He takes all of the blame. He protects them. He protects their investments, their multi-billion-dollar investments. He helps them grow and so forth. So it's not surprising that one, he gets paid a lot of money, and two, they want to renew his deal. That's it for today. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment to this channel in this video. I want to make sure that I'm able to do these on a daily basis and get more sports business stories out to you. So thank you.